Let's talk about the shared Manhwa universe Superstring by Ylab, Webtoon Opinions Part 9. So I'm going to tell you guys everything you need to know about the Superstring universe because I've actually read a decent amount of these stories. I'm going to give you guys my opinions on these stories. So first things first, what is the Superstring universe? It's a shared universe, much like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or comic books, where a bunch of Manhwa properties take place in the same world. So the overall idea is that they want to take down the White Cult, which is a group of people that want to destroy the world and make it rebirth in its proper form. You kind of heard this before. Now, before I go into all the stories that are part of the timelines, I'm going to talk about stories that are part of the timeline, but are not really part of it at the moment. First up, we have Jungle Juice. It is part of the timeline. We just don't know where it takes place in the story, but it is part of it, so you should read it. The second story is coming out this year. The artist is going to be Boichi, the Korean mangaka, creator of Dr. Stone and Sunken Rock. He's going to be doing the art. The author is going to be the author of Blade of the Phantom Master, who's also done another story in the Superstring universe. Next is Queens. It's not translated in English. It has 3 of the female characters from 3 of the different works going on a mission together. Now, the first thing you should know about the Superstring universe is some of these are not translated to English. You can only find them in Korean, or they're not fully translated and they're not done yet. Also, no matter what currently, Distant Sky should be the last one you read. Do not read Distant Sky until you've read everything else that you want to read in this universe. So I'm going to be giving it to you guys in the order that the website has it in. The first one is Cave Woman. Now, if you go to Webtoons, it's 99 chapters and it's called Neolithic Girl. It's about this girl who lives forever and starts off in like the caveman period, and she ends up in modern day Korea where she meets a veterinarian who is dying of a sickness, and it's kind of like a love story and a lot of action, and it's actually pretty good and enjoyable. Next up is Blade of the Phantom Master, and if you remember earlier, he's the same author who's going to be doing the story with Boichi that's coming out later on this year. Now, Blade of the Phantom Master has 2 different versions. The original one is in black and white and it's 81 chapters and it's done. The new version is in colored and it's only 8 chapters translated on Webtoons right now. Here's the thing, you gotta read it if you really want to understand some of the shit that happens later that's really badass. Blade of the Phantom Master is pretty much about this guy who's the last member in this order of people who bring peace to the world, and he's like fighting supernatural threats, and it involves like his story with his best friend. It's a really good story, give it a shot. Next up is electronic horror. It's not translated, so you can't read it, but from what I understand, it's about this guy who owns a store, and the store gives people electronic devices. But you know the monkey paw thing where, like, you know, you get wishes, but it doesn't grant the wishes in the way you want it, and it makes it hard. It's one of those types of stories. And again, it does actually tie into stuff later. Housekeepers next. I'll be honest, I didn't read it. I read like 1 chapter, then dropped it. It's pretty much a horror zombie apocalypse, which I usually like. But the maid character is like this maid who's a robot taking care of her master, who's like a little boy who gets turned into a zombie. I'm like, I didn't care. Parako is not out yet. Next up is Westwood Vibrato. It's about this girl who lives in South America and owns an instrument repair shop. Apparently, she used to be like a weapons manufacturer. I read a decent amount of it, but I ended up never finishing it. It's not a bad story. It's actually kind of beautiful and heartwarming and about war and death and like loving people and meaning of life. Next up is Terror Man. It's 209 chapters and it's completed. It's about a boy who can see disasters before it happens and he pretends to be a terrorist to save people. It gets crazy wicked. It has like almost one of the most tie-ins to everything else in the story. You gotta read it. And honestly, it's mostly everyone's favorite. It's either my first or my second favorite. Terror Man's also getting an anime. Next is My Night Shine Brighter Than Your Days. It's not officially translated, but you can find 1 or 2 chapters translated. It's not an action-based story. It's about a girl whose sister disappears. Her sister's a hostess, and she wants to uncover the mysteries behind her death. The character does show up in other stories, but again. Next is The Island. There are 2 parts to Island, part 1 and 2. Part 1 is in black and white and is completed. Part 2 is in colored, and it's in Korean, and it's not translated to English. It's about this rich girl who's getting hunted by demons, and she ends up meeting this mysterious man who hunts demons. Honestly, it's pretty good. It also has a live-action Korean drama. Next up is Revival Man. It's about a guy that every time he dies, he comes back to life, and he's taking down this giant crime organization. Pretty badass, 175 chapters, and it definitely ties into the Superstring universe. Secret Paradise or Prince of Prince, you don't have to read it. It's a slice-of-life comedy story. It gets like 1 mention in Cave Woman. Next is King Tao. It's 7 chapters currently translated, and it's pretty cool. It does kind of tie into the Superstring universe. It's giant mechas and robots and monsters. Last but not least, Distant Sky. I will say this is either my favorite or my second favorite. I go between this one and Revival Man. It's pretty much about these kids waking up in this destroyed Korea, trying to make their way to the surface. And so many of the characters and other stories show up in this. It's actually, and it pretty much gives you the entire context for everything that happened in the world before it really gets into the story. So it's fire. Like, I love it.